Malia Johnson had it all. Wealth, fame, the perfect life. But beneath the glamour was a secret no one saw coming. She was a kleptomaniac, stealing little things she could easily afford. Rings, scarves, jewelry. Just to fill a void she couldn't explain. Until one night she took a watch. Not just any watch. A priceless heirloom owned by billionaire Elijah Cole. That one mistake didn't just expose her secret. It shattered everything she thought she knew about herself. Malia Johnson was the kind of girl headlines were made for. Her face had graced society magazines. Her name whispered at elite cocktail parties. The only daughter of renowned tech tycoon, Chief Johnson, and fashion entrepreneur Lady Tasha. She had never known life outside of private jets, silk sheets, and chauffeur-driven Bentleys. At just 20, she studied international business at the prestigious Regal Crest University, where students wore designer labels like uniforms and parked sports cars beside lecture halls. Her dorm was a penthouse suite. Her credit cards had no limits. But behind her designer smile was a secret no one saw coming. Malia was a kleptomaniac, not a thief, not a criminal, but someone who battled an unseen war within herself. The urge would come like a whisper, soft, convincing, a ring on a friend's dresser, simple, vintage, probably inherited. Malia had seen it while her friend was in the bathroom, music playing low, laughter still fresh from a shared story. It wasn't flashy or expensive, but the sight of it unlocked something inside her. Her hand moved almost involuntarily. She slipped it into her purse. Her friend never noticed, and Malia never wore it. But the weight of it in her bag gave her an odd sense of control. At a fashion show after-party, surrounded by models, designers, and champagne, she had spotted a delicate silk scarf, a limited edition Hermes piece, folded neatly over the back of a chair. Its owner was busy greeting the press. No one saw Malia's fingers trace the hem, then lift it like a whisper. She slipped it into her clutch. The adrenaline was quiet, not loud like guilt, but still sharp. That night she lay in bed, just holding the scarf. Her heart was calm, her mind still. Then, at a dinner party hosted by her parents, the temptation struck again. A silver spoon, antique and ornate, part of a set older than she was. It wasn't even hers to steal. It belonged to a guest. Yet, when no one was looking, she tucked it under her coat. Not for its value, not out of need, but because her mind whispered, "Take it, and everything will be okay." She didn't understand why she did it. It wasn't something she planned. And afterward, it wasn't pride she felt. Not guilt either. Just peace. A strange kind of peace. Like someone had turned down all the noise in her head. On the outside, her life looked perfect. Every detail polished. Every move graceful. But inside there were cracks. Cracks no one could see. And in those cracks, Malia fought a quiet war. A war no one ever noticed. A war that only paused when she gave in. And took something that wasn't hers. Her parents? Too busy building their empire to notice the cracks forming in their daughter. Too busy conquering the world. To see what was breaking at home. The only person who knew the truth was Nathan, her private bodyguard, ex-military, now full-time damage control. Every time she slipped something into her handbag at a boutique, he'd quietly pay for it. No questions. No judgment. No scenes. Just silence. And loyalty. One day she walked into Chateau Luxe, the most exclusive designer store in Victoria Island. She spent $2 million on clothes that day. No hesitation. No second thoughts. But before she left, she still tucked a tiny gold brooch into her purse. It was small, useless. And she didn't even like it, Nathan saw. He didn't speak. He just sighed and walked up to the counter, paid for it, quietly, before anyone could notice. But Malia noticed, and she hated herself for it. She didn't want to steal. She didn't need to steal. But she couldn't stop. It was a private charity gala, and Malia was dressed in a glittering silver gown. The gala shimmered like a dream. Gold chandeliers, champagne flowing, dresses that sparkled like stars. She moved through the crowd like she belonged. Because she did, at least on the outside. But inside, there was noise. There was guilt. And there was silence. That brooch from earlier still sat quietly in her purse. Heavy, invisible, loud in her head. She kept whispering to herself. Tonight would be different. No stealing. No slipping things into hidden pockets. No shame. But then, she wandered into the restricted lounge. And there it was. sitting inside a glass case, unlabeled, untouched, a vintage silver pocket watch, small enough to fit in her palm. On its face, a carved lion, just like the one on her family crest. Her heart clenched. Her fingers trembled. Nathan was outside. The cameras didn't reach this far. The lights were low. She knew better. She knew. But the ache in her chest was louder than reason. She looked around once, twice. Then she slipped the watch into her purse. Hours later, he arrived. Elijah Cole. Quiet. Commanding. Dressed in a black tux. No smile. No wasted movement. The billionaire rarely appeared at public events. But this night was personal. It was the annual charity gala his late brother had started. And tonight Elijah came to honor him. He stepped into the lounge, his shoes silent on the marble, eyes focused, unbothered by the applause outside. He walked straight to the display case, expecting to find the watch, the one that once belonged to his brother. But the glass was empty. His chest tightened. That wasn't just a timepiece. It was the last gift his brother ever gave him. Elijah had just recovered it from a private collector. And now, it had vanished again. The event turned chaotic behind the scenes. Silent panic. Elijah leaned close to his assistant, his voice low and controlled. Check the surveillance. Discreetly. No media. No noise. In a quiet back room, the footage played. There, clear as day, Malia, slipping past the velvet rope, opening the case, taking the watch. The room fell still. The security team looked to Elijah, awaiting orders. His expression didn't change. Calm, measured. But something in his eyes had hardened. Don't call the police, he said quietly. I'll deal with this, personally. That night, Malia couldn't sleep. She didn't know the full story behind the watch. But she knew one thing for sure. She had made a mistake. She had crossed a line she couldn't take back. Even Nathan, who rarely said a word, noticed something was off. As he drove her home, he kept glancing at her, his eyes cautious, unsure. Malia said nothing. The silence between them was heavy. The next morning, a black envelope was waiting at her door. No stamp, no name, no return address. Inside was a single note written in bold black ink. Give back what you took, or I'll come find you. EC! Her hands trembled. Who was EC? And why did the air around her suddenly feel so heavy? She had no idea that this wasn't just about a stolen object. It was about her past, her future, and a man who would challenge everything she thought she knew about herself. Malia stared at the note for the 100th time. Give back what you took, or I'll come find you. EC! Her heart pounded. It couldn't be about the watch. Could it? She pulled it out of the velvet pouch she'd hidden deep in her purse. It gleamed in her palm, cold and heavy. A lion carved into its face, majestic and proud. Now that she looked closer, the initials EC were etched inside. Her fingers went numb. Nathan walked in without knocking. You look pale, he said calmly, but his eyes were sharp, watchful. Did you take something again? Malia hesitated, then gave a small nod. Nathan let out a long, heavy sigh, like he was carrying something too big for one person. You have to stop, he said quietly. I'm trying, she whispered. He sat down next to her. Do you even know who it belongs to? She shook her head. I got a letter this morning, she said. No name, but it said to return it, or he'll come find me. The initials were EC. Nathan pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, and turned the screen toward her. A news photo filled the screen. A tall, serious man in a dark suit, his face cold, powerful, confident. Headlines surrounded the image. Elijah Cole, tech billionaire, returns to city for memorial gala. The watch lost in the plane crash, finally recovered by Elijah Cole. Malia's face went pale. Her chest tightened. That watch was his? She asked, barely above a whisper. Nathan nodded. His brother died in that crash. The watch was the last thing he gave him. Elijah just got it back after 7 years. He looked at her carefully. And now you have it. Malia's hands shook. She felt sick. Later that evening, Malia stood outside Cole Towers, the sleek skyscraper that pierced the city skyline. Her driver waited at a distance. Nathan stood by her side, arms folded, unreadable. You're not a criminal, Malia, he said gently. But if you don't face this, you might become one. Her heels clicked softly on the marble as she walked into the lobby. The receptionist didn't even ask her name, just nodded. He's expecting you. She was led up 32 floors to a glass office that looked over the city. Inside, surrounded by silence and shadows, stood Elijah Cole. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. I knew you'd come, he said, voice deep and calm. You didn't strike me as someone who hides forever. Malia's mouth went dry. She opened her purse and slowly pulled out the watch. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I don't even know why I took it. I can't seem to stop myself. Elijah didn't take the watch from her hand. He just looked at her, not at the dress, not at the purse, at her. You have a problem, he said, voice calm but firm. And I'm not calling the police. He paused for a moment, then added, I know who you are, Malia. Chief Johnson's only daughter. You can afford anything you want. Another pause, longer this time. But you're gonna make this right. With me. Malia stood frozen, the weight of the watch still in her outstretched hand. Elijah didn't move. He didn't take it. He didn't even blink. I'm not calling the police, he said again, voice low and even. But if you think this ends with an apology, you're wrong. Her lips parted, trying to form words, but nothing came. Then Elijah finally stepped forward. He took the watch gently from her palm, his touch brief but deliberate, like it meant something. He turned and walked to the window, eyes fixed on the glowing city below. My brother gave me this, he said quietly. It was the last thing I had of him, the last thing that reminded me of him, until it was gone. Silence. Malia looked down at the floor. I didn't know, I swear. You didn't care to know, he replied, turning to face her. That's the problem. Her eyes welled with shame. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not even her parents. Especially not her parents. Then Elijah did something she didn't expect. He sat down, calmly, intentionally. You're not a thief, Malia, he said. You're sick. But you've built your world so perfect that no one's ever forced you to face it. Malia's breath caught in her throat. I'm giving you a choice, he continued. You can walk out of here, go back to your mansion, your parties, your secrets, and pray no one else ever finds out, or... She lifted her eyes slowly. You stay, for 1 month. Work with me. Live differently. Earn trust the hard way. I'll help you. But I won't coddle you. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Live with him? Why? She asked, voice trembling. Why would you even offer that? Elijah leaned forward, his voice soft but firm. Because I know what it's like to lose control and have no one notice. Silence filled the room again, heavy with truth. Malia didn't answer right away, but something inside her cracked, maybe for the first time. Someone really saw her. That night, Malia couldn't sleep. She kept hearing Elijah's words in her head, over and over again. And by morning, she had made up her mind. She would do it. She would move in with him. For 1 month. To try. To change. To see if healing was still possible. The car was quiet as it pulled through the tall silver gates of Elijah Cole's estate. The mansion stood on a private hill, wrapped in silence, and surrounded by trimmed hedges and cold beauty. It wasn't just a house. It was a fortress. And tonight, it would become Malia's new home. She sat in the back seat, dressed in simple clothes now. No designer logos, no heels. Just a plain blouse and jeans. Elijah had insisted she leave behind her old wardrobe for now. You're not here to impress anyone, he had said. You're here to find yourself. Nathan hadn't argued, but his goodbye was quiet and stiff. I'll be waiting if you need me, he had whispered at the gate. Inside, the house was spotless, all glass and marble and silence. A housekeeper greeted her with a nod, not a smile. No one treated her like a princess here. Elijah met her in the study. No suit this time, just a black sweater and gray pants. He handed her a piece of paper. These are the rules. She blinked. Rules? He nodded. You're on a schedule. Wake up at 6. Daily therapy sessions. Work hours from 9 to 4 in my office downstairs. No online shopping. No malls. No assistants. No designer deliveries. What kind of work? She asked. You'll help run my foundation. Real people. Real problems. No filters. She swallowed hard. What if I mess up? You will, he said flatly. But that's the point. Later that night, Malia stood by the window of her new room. It was beautiful but cold. No gold-trimmed mirrors, no walk-in closet. Just a bed, a desk, a window. And yet, something felt oddly safe. For the first time in years, no one expected her to be perfect. And that scared her more than anything. But somewhere deep down, a tiny voice whispered, maybe this is what you needed all along. The next morning, Malia rose at 6:1 a.m. No alarm needed. She barely slept. She dressed in plain clothes again and tied her hair back, not for style, but for simplicity. Something about Elijah's world felt stripped down, honest, and oddly grounding. Downstairs, breakfast was quiet. Just fruit, oats, and tea. By 9:00 a.m., Malia was seated beside Elijah in his sleek black SUV. Their destination wasn't what she expected. A small worn-out concrete building with peeling paint and a faded sign that read, Cole Foundation Center, for families in crisis. Malia had never been to this part of the city. She glanced out the window at dusty roads, crowded bus stops, and barefoot children running in alleyways. Her stomach turned. Inside the center, the air smelled of disinfectant and hope. Dozens of women sat in a waiting area, some with toddlers asleep in their laps. Others held forms with shaking hands. A boy, no older than 6, was crying quietly in a corner because he hadn't eaten that morning. Elijah gave her a folder. Start here. Intake forms. Listen. Don't just ask questions. Hear their answers. She sat at a desk and called the first name. The woman who sat across from her had holes in her dress and a baby clinging to her chest. She had lost her husband. Her home. She hadn't fed her kids in 2 days. Malia's voice wavered as she filled the form. By noon, she had heard over a dozen stories, each more heartbreaking than the last. Fathers begging for school fees. Mothers ashamed to admit they were skipping meals to feed their babies. Children too thin for their age. Something broke inside her. That evening, she sat alone in the garden behind the foundation building. Her hands were shaking. Elijah found her there. You did well today, he said gently. I didn't do anything, she whispered. They don't have food, Elijah. And I have everything. I was stealing earrings I didn't even like while children cry over hunger. Her voice cracked. I've been blind. He didn't say, it's okay. He didn't lie. He just sat beside her. You were hurting in a different way, he said. Pain doesn't always look poor. Malia turned to him. I want to change. I want to give, not take. Elijah nodded. Then start here. Start small, but start. She took a deep breath. For the first time, her hands weren't itching to take something. They were ready to give. The next week passed differently. Malia no longer counted hours in luxury spas or boutiques. Now she counted bags of rice distributed, forms processed, and school uniforms handed out. She organized files, learned names, played with children during breaks. She smiled. Not the perfect photo-ready smile from her social media days, but something real, something soft. Each morning she woke up before sunrise. Not because Elijah told her to, but because she wanted to. She began collecting small donations through friends from school, and even called her father's assistant anonymously to redirect some unused inventory from her mother's fashion line to struggling girls at the foundation. But she didn't tell her parents where she was. They hadn't even noticed her absence. One afternoon, Malia helped a little boy named Tomiwa tie his shoes. He was 8, thin as a stick, and had just lost his mother to illness. When she handed him a backpack full of supplies, he hugged her tight and whispered, Thank you, Auntie. Her heart melted. In that moment, the old Malia, the one obsessed with appearances, vanished. Elijah watched from the hallway, arms folded, a soft smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Later, as they walked back to the car, he broke the silence. You're changing, he said. I feel it. she replied. For the first time,